Excellent. Yeah, you can go ahead and start. And so once Dana starts the webinar, then you'll see people dropping in and
We're started.
excellent. All right. Got 12. 10 attendees in so far. Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. Mike, I'll get started at 2 minutes after the hour.
Okay.
Gives people a chance to transition in, and then
You just let me know when to begin.
all right.
All right, the poll's ready to go.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, well, good morning, or good afternoon now, everybody. Welcome to the February edition of our Western Idaho chapter Lunch and Learn. This is Brian Russell, your Lunch and Learn coordinator. Today we have Mike DeLong joining us, and he's going to talk to us, as you can see on the screen there. There's more to success than startup. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Mike to get started. Just be aware we do have the chat available. So as questions come up for Mike, or just feel free to jump into the chat and I'll be monitoring them. So Mike, I'll hand it off to you.
Well, thank you very much, Brian, for inviting me to present today. As Brian said, my name's Mike DeLong. I've spent most of my career leading capital projects in food manufacturing. I cut my teeth with McCain Foods in Canada and other parts of the world, and now I help potato processors around the world execute capital projects and optimize their operations. Through my career working on projects, I noticed something kind of interesting. So, some projects that were successful on paper, like they were delivered on time and on budget, they really struggled to deliver business results after startup or after handover. And then vice versa, I've seen projects that weren't successful by traditional metrics perform incredibly well after go live. So, that got me thinking. There needs to be a way to replicate the successes on both sides. Oops. So first of all, I wanted to just poll the group. We're about 35 people today. I'm just curious which industries you work in. So we'll just take a few minutes to note this. And I will say that because of my background, this is geared more towards construction. I'll apologize in advance to, more of our IT friends in the group. But I'm sure that you'll be able to draw parallels between what we talk about and what your day-to-day looks like as well. So Dana, when you're ready, if you could share the results, I'd be curious to see. Oh, we got a pretty good mix. Actually, more people in construction and manufacturing than I expected. So, all right, very good. And IT is our lowest group today. Okay, so startup day. When you're working on a construction project, there's a project team that's responsible for getting that project done. And when the project is basically done, everybody celebrates and they get ready to move on. Some might even have new assignments before the project's even over. So, from the projects team's perspective, they've done their job. However, it's usually the first day for the operations team to take on a new project. And the reality is, when that's live, and if you've lived through one of these, you've seen it. Operations is like a deer in the headlights. They're just like, wow, now I've got this big beast to deal with. So my perspective is startup isn't the finish line. It's just a milestone. What happens after that milestone truly defines what the success of the project is, not just that the project was completed per traditional project performance metrics. So as Brian mentioned, I wanted to give you a little bit of background, a little bit more background so you understand my perspective. So I my name is Mike DeLong. I'm known in the potato industry as the fry guy, and that's because of all the work we do for French fry processors and potato chip processors around the world. I've been in this industry for over 20 years, leading projects up to $350 million, and also, like I mentioned, doing operational improvement programs in these food manufacturing facilities. A few years ago, I founded Projects Consultants. We support industry leaders like McCain Foods and Lamb Weston with their capital projects, right down to, growers that are getting into the French fryer potato chip business. I also host the Tater Talk podcast, which was launched a couple months ago. Talk to folks from around the global potato industry to hear about their perspectives and their impact on the industry. And I've held my PMP certificate since 2012. I'm also a mechanical engineer. I held that professional engineer status in Canada, but in the US, I don't have the PE. Somebody saying they see a blank screen share. Is everybody okay?
No, it looks
Okay.
fine for me.
Okay.
Not sure.
And then outside of the
What's
work,
going
I
on.
do a lot of travel, both work and as a family. I'm a family man. We do a lot together. And I say I'm an aspiring triathlete. Um, I've completed several triathlons in the past and trying to get back into it at a more, aggressive level, but it's been difficult. But I am first and foremost a potato lover. So let's think about when a project is actually successful. I've kind of, primed the pump on this already, and it depends on your perspective. So, number one, it could be construction is done. We've completed the project, all the equipment's installed, it's all tested. Or it could be when the first production is achieved, like we made our first widgets And so everybody celebrates. And that is a good reason to celebrate. But is the project actually successful at that point? Or it could be when output is stable. You're getting consistent, production performance over a certain period of time. Or is it really when the business case is delivered, the ROI, the return on investment is tracking as planned? So I would argue that that's the most important one, but think about which milestone is truly going to define the success for your organization. Is it really that construction is completed? It might be if you're the contractor, but if you're the client, it's truly not successful until you start to deliver ROI. So here's the myth. Projects may appear successful, but they don't deliver business results. So project metrics like cost control or budget, adhering to the schedule, whether you delivered all the scope that was agreed to, whether you met safety performance targets and you had very few injuries or fatalities or hopefully no fatalities. Um, those are excellent metrics and you need those during a project. But then there's the business metrics is what production throughput or capacity are we expecting to get from this investment? We've got yield targets involved if you're converting raw materials to a finished product. You've got margins, extremely important, especially with a long project that can span a couple years of construction. Are the margins still valid? And then equipment reliability or, translated to downtime. Are you meeting downtime targets to ensure that productivity is there? So just completing that project on time, on budget, all the scope, nobody got injured. That's great, but it doesn't guarantee delivering the business value. So there's a disconnect between those two systems, right? So that's where I say that this project to performance starts to come in. So some spots where the value is lost is basically operations misalignment. So that is where your, for example, um, I don't have it here, but many of you have probably seen the expectations versus reality memes of like a tree swing or something like that, where, what the customer expected and what they got is completely different. So there could be misalignment on expectations about what the project is actually delivering. Then there's the readiness is not designed in. So that's like a whole scope of things. That could be Um, you didn't have correct spare parts identified and actually delivered. Um, maybe not all the ingredients or materials are on site for testing. Then there's the knowledge transfer gaps. That's where, adequate training was not conducted. Maybe there's too few resources or people available to support all the pressure that happens on startup. That's a systematic failure. It's not just, like one thing got overlooked. It's really that traditional project delivery means don't always account for all of these things. So when these types of things happen, these misalignments, missed expectations, knowledge transfer gaps, that's just going to extend the ramp up periods. It's going to result in unpredictable performance, and then it's going to delay the ROI. And I'll say like organizations and projects don't fail to deliver because people don't care. They often care very deeply. It's because, in my experience, they don't have a system to adequately prepare for operational readiness. So that's where project performance planning comes in. Some of you
Hey,
have
Mike,
maybe been
there was a
introduced to this as startup.
there was a question. There's a question from Rod. So does organization change management come into play for capital projects? For example, ADCAR, use of ADCAR.
So I'll admit I'm not familiar with the ADCAR term, but the organizational change management. certainly does come into play. And I'm going to speak about that here shortly. It's actually a key part of planning for success. So just stand by, Rod. We'll get into that. And then after this, I'll be sure to look up what ADCAR is. It's been a while since I've really looked at the PMBOK in that level of detail. So P2P planning. It's really a structured approach that is going to ensure that the project delivers the intended and measurable business results, not just delivering startup of the project. It's also an important mindset. It's just not another tool or toolkit or methodology. It's much more than that. It's a shift of how organizations think about their projects from the beginning, connecting like project milestones directly to the operational performance and the capability post go live, post startup. And P2P, project to performance planning, is not any one phase. It really kind of overlays and integrated in the entire project lifecycle. It's going to ensure that that readiness is built in from the beginning and is not an afterthought. Many traditional projects, and I see this still, is that operational readiness is really a late stage activity. Like it's often thought about during a commissioning period, which in my opinion is far too late. So this is going to bring it back to very earliest concept discussions when a project is initiated. So take a moment and think about your last project startup or go live, and think about in your experience during these phases of your project, which received the least attention, particularly thinking about how is this going to impact startup? And then go back and run through your mind, where could the concepts that we talk about today really benefit the work that you do? Core framework for P2P is getting from delivering a project to getting business performance. And it starts early where you're going to design for operations, right? So you're embedding the operational requirements into very early design and engineering decisions. You're engaging cross-functional teams, subject matter experts that are going to contribute to the design. It's very difficult to design by committee, so there's like tools to kind of help gain input but not lose the message and churn. Um, and then next is kind of building for the startup of your project, and that is about developing the capability of the team in parallel with construction activities, not just when commissioning comes around. So that's training. It's about documentation. It's about provisioning, procurement of, spare parts, materials, things like that. And then when you're commissioning the line, it's not about simply ensuring that the equipment works or that the software works. It's ensuring a whole range of functionality is actually delivered to meet expectations. So every stage is there to intentionally prepare that team, the operations team, to achieve that predictable performance. Predictable is key. So the first phase, planning for success, is very, very much a part of the foundation of project building. So number one is you're defining the success criteria from the beginning and you align everybody on it. So how are you going to, what is the business goals of the project, the critical success factors, I call them, the CSFs, and those are agreed upon, aligned, and recorded, usually built into a charter. Then everybody agrees that we're going to, we're going to adopt this P2P mindset. So then you start to build out your P2P team. And this is where organization change management can come in from like a resource standpoint. You need to define the people that are going to, number one, be the P2P manager or P2P lead. also called like startup manager or operational readiness manager or lead. That person is going to steer this process through the duration of the project, through the whole life cycle of the project. And then you have to assign, the resources that are going to participate in the cross-functional design reviews and so on, and establish all those responsibilities. Often these people have a day job. And to do this right, they need to have some capacity to focus on the project and the P2P process. So there's some shuffling that may need to occur, and people need to be committed to assign time and energy and resources to this process. And then there's just onboarding this new team onto the P2P methodology. So it's introducing the framework, ensuring that everybody understands how it's going to work, and training people up on the requirements and the use of the different tools within the framework. Now, once the foundation is set and you're into the design phase, in capital projects and food processing, I talked about cross-functional teams that it would exist in any industry, but in our area, it's really about ensuring that operations teams are engaged in the conceptual and preliminary and detailed design phases. So we're getting feedback on equipment layouts that are optimized for workflow, optimized for material flows, accessing for cleaning and maintenance, um, and also um, that we are making sure that as a project team, we're not missing any expectations from the operations representatives that are assigned to this review process. You know, there's been earlier in my career, I had multiple instances where you would get experts in a room around a table. You would look at a drawing in 2D, often, just like an over layout view at a drawing, and you're asking people for their input on, how would you clean this, and what do you need to do to clean this, um, and we wouldn't always get the feedback we needed because there was just, people weren't familiar with interpreting drawings. So we've started to use tools like virtual reality or augmented reality where we can do 3D modeling like this and actually fly people through the models. So it's just to say that we're investing heavily in getting the input early because it does lead to better outcomes later on. There's less cost of changes required to, maybe get access to something to clean or to maintain. And it's extremely important to do that work up front. Now, the next phase of P2P is building in readiness during construction. So your building, your process line, your software, it's going through development. We start doing training as soon as the equipment design is finalized, the facility design is nearing completion, and we're starting to define teams. Um, we try and if a bunch of new operators are coming into an organization because of an expansion or it's a new startup, it's often difficult to commit to bring people in very early because of cost. But it's extremely important to recognize the importance of doing the parallel training during construction so it's not crammed in the commissioning and startup period. Every situation is going to be different. I just call out that doing it at the end of construction is too late. It needs to start in parallel with construction. Documentation during construction is really important. In our world, that means standard operating procedures, standard maintenance procedures, you know, instruction manuals, operations manuals, maintenance manuals are collected from equipment suppliers and provided to people for training. We got spare parts lists. We're ordering necessary spare parts lists. We're developing maintenance plans. All of this work is front end loaded before startup. And that's just ensuring that when that is being built during project construction, we're not missing the boat on any of this stuff and cramming it in at the end. So the scrambling creates so much frustration and so much, um, basically distraction away from ensuring that, everybody's doing the best they can to keep people safe, for instance, and and start up on time. Now, when it comes to commissioning a process line in particular, the traditional approach is, does the equipment do what it was expected? And then we basically sign off on, yes, it it met its operational goals as a unit or as a system, and then that's handed over essentially to an operations team. Whereas with P2P, the operations team is actively involved before and especially during commissioning activities. So they're working hand in hand with maybe, you know, subject matter experts from within the company or outside experts from the equipment manufacturer or other consultants. And it's really shifting from just verifying that the systems work technically to ensuring that it validates the capability of the system, and they're doing that together. So in other words, does it heat up water to 200 degrees, yes or no? Well, how quickly does it do it? Does it maintain that temperature? Does it, are the flows within parameters, etc. So really, it's about verifying equipment functions perform as designed. It's validating that the process is able to deliver the intended output under true operating conditions. And then having that team on board through that process really helps build the competence and the confidence that they can deal with hiccups or adversity or, irregular events. So commissioning is extremely important phase to ensure stable and sustainable performance, not just simply like a handover of a checklist to say that we did this. So just to help visualize how P2P can help with startup, the black curve you see is an example of a ramp up curve in a food manufacturing plant, where on the left, on the vertical axis, you see kind of percent of output. So you can see over the course of 5 months, we're we're still not at 100% output. And this can definitely really happen. And I've seen this happen. Sometimes that ramp up is built in and it's intentional, so to not overcommit sales to customers, for instance. But sometimes this is the result when in the intended result was 100% from week one. Now, P2P can accelerate getting out of the gate on startup much quicker and much higher performance over the coming weeks. It's definitely going to result in that just more like vertical ramp up. Some companies say vertical startup, and the intent is you're just ramping up to intended production extremely quickly. So a real world example, or maybe multiple examples from this, it comes from my world, the French fry world, and it applies to both greenfield and upgrade projects and actual French fry factories. So before we implemented P2P program in our capital projects, I showed you an example just now where a ramp up took 5 to 6 months to achieve that stable desired output. We had frequently unplanned downtime because of, there was equipment that wasn't designed correctly. It was difficult to access for cleaning and for maintenance, so that didn't get done as scheduled, which led to additional downtime. Operators weren't onboarded about particular nuances of the equipment and the production process prior to startup. And the end result was missing operating budgets by a mile. Customers were shorted and created a ton of ill will with customers. and then a completely deflated and frustrated team, just completely frazzled. When we got into some other projects, we recognized that we had to do it differently. So we developed this operational readiness framework and we used it on a project where we had an 80-day shutdown of the factory, and it was critical that on day 81, the factory got up and running on target immediately. So from very early on, we implemented the P2P framework. We established a team. We defined what we needed to do to prepare for startup. We achieved that stable output immediately on startup, like day one when we turned everything on. Um, Going forward, we had much fewer schedule disruptions. We had clear, predictable performance expectations. Um, we also knew exactly who was responsible for what, monitoring the system when it was up and running. Everybody knew their place because all the work was done ahead of time. So the result was we actually had positive budget variance. All the orders were fulfilled. We didn't have to, go back and tell clients we had to short deliver their orders. And we had a team that was completely confident. They knew exactly what they needed to do and were able to execute. So that really shows how you can like transform a project. Two projects can be done in two different manners, but the mindset is completely different. And it takes some fortitude to invest in the people and the work up front, but you can have significant results. So like I said, the levers to deliver ROI is really the faster ramp up, and in production that is critical. Um, you're going to lower operational risk. Everybody knows what they're doing. You've developed like lockout tagout plans for electrical equipment and rotating equipment. The maintenance procedures are defined. You've built out spare parts list and built an inventory of spares on hand. That means you're going to have much more predictable output as well. Everybody knows what they're doing. Quality will be much more in range. Production will be in range or closer to target. You're really going to accelerate the payback period and the ROI. And like I mentioned just in the last slide, it's not just about the speed. It's not about just delivering results. It's about making it sustainable. And we all know that it's hard to find workers, especially in food processing. So if we can build a confident and capable team, you're going to burn out less people. They're going to stick around. It builds that culture of performance and accountability and success. And it's P2P is really powerful when it comes to delivering that. So just to recap a bit, what makes it work in practice, it's really that early operations engagement and ownership. That P2P leader that I mentioned earlier, ideally, that is somebody like a production manager or a plant manager or a shift supervisor, somebody that has skin in the game. And that leader is assigned, um, clear expectations and accountability for, design aspects early on. And they're also given responsibility and accountability to manage a team that's going to, he's like a liaison between the project team and the operations team, but on his side with the operations team, he's got to have the ability to ensure people on the operations side are participating in the P2P program. And then really what works in P2P, and every situation is different, is to define in a stabilization period after startup. I gave an example where we had to be productive on day one, but if time allows and situation allows, building in a ramp up really does help and being clear on what that ramp up is. And that can kind of offload some of the front end work and maybe save some money on the front end, but it's really about just setting expectations, working the plan, and then executing the plan. And I'll say that like leadership of the company really has to be engaged in this. It takes fortitude to make it work. They have to support it from the beginning. So, how do we do this? Well, there's a toolkit, and the toolkit is customized depending on your industry and the size of the project, but it basically it's comprised of these three areas. So number one is the charter, and or you build this into the charter, but that's defining what the business success metrics are for the project, whether it's certain volume demand or certain production targets, certain yield targets, waste targets, efficiency, reliability, cost. Those are baked in as critical success factors from the beginning, and that's always there as a reference. Comprehensive tools set. So this is things like checklists for meeting reviews, agendas for meeting reviews, um, developing things like spare parts lists, understanding what lead times are on spare parts, doing criticality review on spare parts, identifying all the materials you need for startup, the staffing plans, the training plans, all of that stuff is a set of documents and tools to support that planning process through the project lifecycle. And then once it comes after commissioning, you have a startup performance tracker, and that's a dashboard. It can be in an MES system, within an ERP system, or it can be a spreadsheet. It could be a whiteboard, but you're tracking the actual KPIs versus target KPIs post startup. And then you're actually, actively looking at those and making adjustments in your plan where practical. These tools combined are really powerful to ensure that the planning process for operational planning process is, um, basically just follows a plan. So where does this go wrong? Um, in my experience, I've often seen training that needs to happen that's compressed into just days instead of weeks or months for something more complex. But it's either schedule or budget pressure says, I can't put the people that need to be involved onto this project too soon because it's going to cost me money, or they're not available, or I don't want to hire them yet. I'm not saying you have to hire everybody early and train everybody early, but you have to look at it on a case by case basis to make sure you're getting adequate training and an adequate investment is going into that training. Second thing is commissioning checklists. They're just signed off without operators truly understanding the systems. Like, how does the system work? What happens in upset conditions? How does start up and shut down and ramp down work? How does steady state look? It's more of like that capability handover and not just a commissioning checklist handover. Um, a Sometimes a big challenge is that you're oversold and you need to do the project and be at 100% capacity right away. And doing that without having the team capability there is just unrealistic. So you can often have an expectation by management or sales team that says, we need to deliver this product on X day. And not enough goes into preparing the operations team for that. Recipe for failure. And then another one is the startup teams, the commissioning teams from the project side, they just disappear. They kind of do their job, they hand over paperwork and say, my job is done. I'm off to the next thing. And they're not there to play a role in troubleshooting. So it's important to at least keep some resources assigned and build that into your budget and plan up front and, commit to have OEM resources or technical resources there to support. So, I mean, it may seem obvious, but I'll state it anyway. The real irony here is that the faster you push through some of those like commissioning activities to get to startup is often just going to lead to a ramp up period or a post startup period or a go live period that just goes on and on and on without delivering the expected results. So it's like, do you want the pain now or the pain later? Because there's going to be pain unless if you don't plan well. So after startup, you've done your P2P planning in the beginning, building that operational readiness. After startup really comes the stabilization phase. And this is really on operations. If they've done P2P, participated in the P2P program, they're going to go into the stabilization phase where you meet the baseline target metrics. And then you can move into optimization. It's really about, continuing that mindset of we're preparing for success and now we've stabilized that success. How can we improve upon that success? So when you can get to a stable baseline faster, you can get to an optimization mode faster and get even better results than you had expected or targeted for your project. I truly believe, and I've seen this, that planning for performance dramatically changes your project outcomes. Um, Startup is always risky. You're going to reduce risk if you invest in P2P planning or operational readiness planning. It, being successful doesn't happen by accident. Meeting performance targets doesn't happen by accident. And it certainly doesn't happen by doing a project alone. You have to build it in with intentional operational readiness planning. And then thirdly, projects will succeed when the operations team is ready to succeed. That means they've had adequate time, they've been given adequate information, they've had adequate or appropriate amount of knowledge transferred from the project team, and they're fully equipped to start to deliver those business results. So when it comes to building, I'll just leave you with this. Don't just build a plant. Don't just build a project. You build a team that's ready to run it. That's really what it comes down to, equipping that team to ensure that they can deliver the business results. So that concludes the presentation on the P2P program, and I would like to open it up for any questions or comments. I'd love to get some feedback. Was there anything
Feel free
in the
to come
chat,
off.
Brian?
Yeah, feel free to jump in chat or come off mute, ask questions. I was just going to say, Mike, that from my experience too, where in my role I typically deal with software implementation projects or business process projects, that this all rings true as well, that putting that effort up front into what does it look like to operate and go live with those that are going to own the process after go live, after the project's done, is as important as planning the project itself. So I think this resonates regardless if it's a capital project or non-capital. I see a couple comments in the chat.
Jim says challenge is not having enough time in the schedule. I guess, what do you mean, Jim? Is that just the project schedule, over the course of months or years or weeks or the duration of the project, or is that in one's day to be able to do all the tasks it takes to plan for this? Either way, it comes down to prioritization.
Yeah, I would say not having that expectation up front of what is commissioning truly going to take in terms of timeline, and then having buy-in from all the stakeholders within the project. That rushing has been a challenge, or the expectations of rushing has been a challenge on projects that I've been a part of, and it's never ended well.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry to hear that.
So this
It's
has been a
definitely.
very helpful presentation, I guess I would say that.
Well, thank you, Jim. And I will say it does take some influencing of leadership. It takes some influencing of leaders to get their mindset to to this point where you invest up front, you commit up front to this work, because I see it as a series of levers, right? You can pull on the schedule lever, but you're going to have to back off on, you're going to have to also pull on like the investment lever to, you want to get it done faster, we're going to have to reduce our risk. And to do that, we're going to have to invest more upfront to prepare everybody. And sometimes there is only a limited amount of time, but then it's a trade-off discussion. You're like, are you comfortable with these results as a result of pressuring the schedule? Because this is the risk, and you can start to define the risk and categorize the risk and have a real discussion about that. Don says having people who own the new process be part of the development of it is key to the success of the project since they are 100% since they are the owners. Yeah, I agree 100%, Don. For
Part of that
for some of you
buy-in,
folks,
part of the buy-in, right?
yeah, it's all part of the buy-in. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's so easy for somebody to stand back and it's like, and it could be like a corporate versus regional thing, or it could be like management versus operations or floor worker thing, but it it's all just having that alignment and at least having people giving people a chance to contribute, because very much it could say like they did a this is what they gave me and I can't work with it, and their hands go
Exactly.
up, and it can be like this basically um oh yeah, somebody just said sabotage. I agree. It's like sabotage if they're actively disconnected. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, Rod, agree. Lots of similarities between capital projects and all types of projects.
Yeah, absolutely. This framework can be applied to just about anything, um and I would say that it's just a matter of adapting it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Hey, Mike, as far as sharing the presentation,
Yes, I can do that.
can you just send it to me and then we'll get it
Yes.
distributed out through the normal channels through the chapter?
Yes, I'll
Okay.
absolutely do that. And I will say, um, I'm we're developing a set of tools for this as well. They're not quite ready for public release, but um,
Hmm.
I will include a link in the presentation that will at least put you on a mailing list for when it's ready. We can send out a little toolkit on that in the
Oh,
next few
excellent.
weeks. Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Well,
All right.
thank
Well,
you, Brian, and thank
thanks,
you,
Mike.
everybody. Yeah, I appreciate this opportunity to share.
Absolutely. Okay.
Okay.
Well, everyone,
Everyone have a great day.
yeah, good rest of your day. Talk to you later.
Thank you.